All right. Well, let's get into it. So again, good morning. Appreciate everybody joining. My name is Skinner Daherty. I'm the CEO and founder of the Clinician Exchange. I am joined by my esteemed panel this morning of Vas Abramov, Frank Rapullo, and Rob Ferguson. This is Medtech Momentum, and it's the second installment of the Medtech Momentum series, where we intend to help enlighten everybody on the medtech journey as they look to take products from ideation all the way to market. And what better a panel of experts than these three gentlemen to help you walk through that and really provide insight. Today's installment is going to focus a little bit more on pre-commercialization, okay? So in the last installment, we talked a lot more about the idea of patents and really preparing to get moved in and preparing for that regulatory process. And again, we talked about it there. We could spend 18 hours on each component of that and give everybody a seminar on that. And again, if you have any questions, we encourage you to reach out to any one of our panelists and ask them. So we're giving you broad strokes on some of this, okay? But the idea is to help set you up enough for success where you at least understand some of the expectations that are going to be coming at you in each stage. So in today's pre-commercialization stage, we're going to talk a lot more about prototyping and getting a product ready to showcase, because at this stage, this is where you're looking for opportunities to potentially start to really raise capital to make your idea come to life. We're going to talk about what it's going to take to get that capital in. What are the things that investors are looking for in companies and people at this stage? And we're going to talk about what are the ideas beyond a product that you're going to need to start set yourself up for that next critical stage of commercialization. Right? Everybody has to remember this whole thing is a waterfall. Okay? It's not just a separated idea. If everything is done well, every stage flows smoothly into another. And I say smoothly with air quotes, right? We all know there's going to be challenges, but as smooth as you can get it to go, the better off you're going to be in the end. And that's what we're going to try to help set everybody else up. Because as we move into the full commercialization stages, it's all the efforts that you put into these stages that are going to lead to the success later. Okay. So with that, let's start off in talking about, I've got this great idea for a widget and I've patented it. I've already started investigating the regulatory pathway. And at this point, I've got a napkin sketch, but I got to take it from that napkin sketch. I actually have to make a prototype. So Vas, you're the expert. Tell us a little bit about what are some of the key components that our audience needs to start thinking about as they migrate from, I've got this great drawing, to actually making something that they can show people.
Well, if you have a napkin sketch, you probably can come to the company like ours. And our expertise lies in converting your napkin sketch into the final product that you can manufacture, that you can sell. So the first step is to take this napkin sketch and perhaps work with industrial designer, right? Industrial designer will look at that napkin sketch and they will work directly with you with a bunch of back and forth to find the form and fit to your product that will be possibly designable, i.e., something that can actually truly be put together. Because a lot of napkin sketches are not possible, right? They need to be realistic. They will also work with the form, fit, and function, with how user is going to use it, with and how manufacturer will possibly put together. After that, once you have those sketches, you can go to engineer and ask them to do solid models of this product, right? Kind of make it. It's still not going to be functional. It's just going to be something on your computer that you can truly see if everything is coming together. Once you've done that, you can go to different rapid prototyping methods, and depending on plastic, metal, what are you using? Are you going to have any kind of electronic boards in it? Then you have a true prototypes. Now, true prototype is something that is physical, something that looks like the final product, but something that may not be working if it like may not truly have electronic boards, may not truly function. But it may be slightly functional, but it may function just once instead of 100 times that it's supposed to. So it is something to bridge the gap between you and fundraising efforts and marketing efforts. It will help others to understand your idea.
So in the form and function spectrum, okay, what I'm hearing you say is at this stage, we're still mostly leaning on form. It's got to have maybe some minimal functionality to show, okay, if it's a widget, how the spring loading or something like that works, right, or, some sort of the key mechanisms in there, deploy, whatever it may be. But for the most part, it's not going to be the one that you're going to have everybody use 100 times.
No, it's probably going to end up, just to kind of put it in financial sense, you're going to have one or two of those, and they're going to cost a lot more than your final product. Because every step of the way, it's going to be using process that is a lot more expensive than the final process you're going to be used. They most likely going to be assembled by hand and going to be very rare. And it's really just to have you understand how it operates and understand if you need to change anything, and to go to your doctors or whoever is going to use it to start that marketing research, and to go into whoever you're going to be trying to raise your money with, and try to show them that, hey, I have this. It's possible. Look, I have one of those.
So, and just to confirm here, so from this perspective, this is pretty easy, right? I mean, you come to you say, make a prototype, one for one, perfect. It's all set up, right? There's no iteration. You get it right on the first try every time?
I would say it's hard to be certain that if anyone got it on the first time.
Yes.
But I would say getting it on the first time is highly unlikely. Yes, just like with industrial design stage, you're going to have a lot of back and forth. You're going to be talking to your users. You're going to be using it yourself. You're going to be talking to engineers. It may not physically work. The forces may be different. The electronic boards that you did probably are going to be breadboards. So it's going to be especially the first one, it's going to be very far away from what your final product is going to be. As a matter of fact, most prototypes are not manufacturable. If you are planning to do injection molding, your first prototype most likely not going to be designed to be moldable, right?
Got it.
Your first boards probably are going to be changed as you get in deeper into regulatory testing, deeper into understanding of safety regulations. So, it's just enough to help you explain to others what are you trying to do.
So all inventors have to be comfortable with the concept of iteration. Right? That you have to be comfortable with that, and knowing you're even as comfortable as you are, right? Every inventor has told you that first prototype, whatever they've made, software, hardware, etc., they fall in love with it until 2 days later. And then they look at it and they're like, oh, that was a piece of garbage, right?
Well, I mean, usually what happens is that, and I heard it more than once, is that the most important thing, we want it to look sexy. I had one inventor describe it. I wanted to look like one of those fast motorcycles. And I mean, the whatever he had sketched did look kind of like a fast motorcycle. What it ended up looking, it looked really fast, but it was much different from what initially was anticipated.
So as a patient, The last thing I ever want to hear anybody talk about with a medical device is that it's fast. I just don't. It's not unless it's some sort of software system, et cetera. But for most mechanical things, I'm okay if it's not fast. Right? Just want it to work right.
Well, I don't know. If I was undergoing some kind of a procedure, I would like that procedure to go real fast.
As long as it's done right. That's all we care about.
That is fast and right.
So Frank, let me turn it to you here for a second. From the investor standpoint, how critical is it to show them, like, how much weight does the investment community place in how a prototype looks and functions in the arc of what they're evaluating and in the arc that an inventor or a company is trying to approach them with?
There's so many spaces. So you got to start looking at market cap, market potential. This is where you start to get your value readiness in place. You got to understand, are you going in a physician preference item? Is it med surg, capital? Is it a biologic? The list goes on. And so it's never too early to understand where you're going to have access, right? Is it the acute care market, non-acute, a little bit of both? Is it going to go from the acute all the way to home care? So that's your due diligence on the front end. And you want to start thinking about how your product's going to be paid for. Where does it get absorbed into the financial infrastructure in healthcare? So investors, they're eager to see things come to market and that market penetration. So they're going to have eyes on it. The question becomes, are you looking more for strategic? Are you looking for initial capital? Are you going to go down a path of friends and family, crowdfunding? Are you going to go to the bank? Are you going to bootstrap it? There's so many variables to consider. And also, you got to understand how the company's structured, because some people just aren't in a position to go raise capital, and they start to look at giving away shares, warrants, stocks, certificates, whatever you want to call them, right? Not true equity all the time, but something that eventually leads to a strike price. So those are important, because you are going to hit, there's an evolution in the development of a product, pre-commercialization, that determines when do you bring in capital to start building up inventory as you create demand for your product. I know it sounds like you're jumping ahead, or I'm at least, going probably 5 to 10 steps further on the pre-commercialization, but there's too many companies that sit in their own little silos, build product because they're in the incubator and they got grant money, but they don't understand the channels their product's going to go into.
But as it comes to the initial prototype, I guess, Frank, is how critical is it to get that right for the investment community? How much weight do they place on that?
They want it. Of course they want it right, but they only know what they know. Right?
Okay. Got it.
I mean, you get into VCs and private equity. I mean, they're throwing a lot of money at different technologies, and they only know what they know until they get market intelligence or voice of customer feedback that you're going to share with them. So unless they do their own due diligence, they only know what you're going to tell them. So to them, it is right because you're telling them it's right. But until you put data around it to support it, I would say if you have a savvy group that understands medtech, then it's going to be extremely important. Okay. But it's critical that you get it right to begin with anyways and work with experts. Otherwise, you're going to be shifting constantly.
So, Rob, let me turn to you here for a second. Is the best practice to take only the features and benefits that I have in my own idea, build a prototype on that, and say this is the greatest product? This is a prototype. Is that the best practice, Rob?
Great question. No. It really is really guided around similar to what Frank was just saying. You don't know what you don't know. And many times there's a concept, they push it through the engineering aspect of it. They really don't have a complete offering of what the customer's saying. Maybe they have friends and family, a few others that will go and give their comment, and then they feel that's validated at that point. And also too, they'll maybe go online and look out into the internet and find information that substantiates it to them, but don't realize how important it is to have credible and valid information to determine that pathway. So yeah, there's a lot more to it.
Even to the prototype. I mean, what should they be doing? Because again, I'm sticking with this prototype idea right now. How much investigation should they be doing in terms of what should I be including in this?
Yeah, it all depends on how much they've got to spend and want to waste. Because,
Okay.
yeah, in working with an engineering firm, similar as Voss has, is it's important that they know what is out there, what they're up against, what's going to be the safety measures, where is it going to compete? Is it going to be a Me Too product, or is it going to be better than what's being offered? So as they start to develop, the efficiency now takes place. And so they're able to communicate and know more from the customer base, but as well as what the market is saying about these type of products and the potential of growth.
Okay. So Vass, I want to bring it back to you now. So now we've made a prototype. Let's say it was even 3D rendered in some capacity, right? You've worked with the industrial engineers, et cetera, to go, when do I start shifting my mindset from I made one to now starting to think about the pre-manufacturing phases and needing to make many?
Well, you kind of think of it from the beginning, right? That's why you went to industrial designer because
Okay.
usually the initial sketches are unmanufacturable and unrealistic. So, you basically have very large something, what have you, and you start chopping at it, chopping at it, chopping at it. And every iteration, as we discussed, you're going to get it closer and closer and closer and closer to manufacturing. Then once you basically, at some point, you're going to say, you know what, this is what I want, right? It looks right, it feels right, it works right. I got forces correctly, what have you. The boards are sitting in here. The cooling is working properly. I have the final product, right? I have it in my rapid prototype form as a prototype kind of, but it's already, so there are different stages of prototype. And I guess that's where people getting very confused when people saying, give me a prototype, right? There is a first stage of prototype, which is very rough. Then there is a second stage of prototype. And now you are getting very, very close to manufacturing, but it's still not going to go into manufacturing. And finally, your final prototype is the product that is going to go into manufacturing. You have tested everything. It looks exactly like your final, it's still, let's say, 3D printed part, but it has all the aspects of molded parts. You know where the gate is, you know your draft, you know everything. And this final prototype, you're going to send to the tool maker. You're going to send it to the board maker. You're going to send it to or sheet or sheet component manufacturer, whatever it is. This is your final design, right? And then even after you've done that, they're going to come back to you and they're going to say that, hey, we would like you to change something here. We would like you to change something here. And then you're going to do another redesign. And then you have a product that is ready for manufacturing. And then furthermore, while you are doing all that, you're also going to be working with your manufacturing engineers. You're going to give them initial prototypes, and they're going to be continuously giving you feedback as to what doesn't work for them. Maybe, you put a screw in, you can make a prototype 105 with the screw in that location. But as to ongoing manufacturing, it's impossible. So now you're getting information from all the people that are going to be making the components, assembling components, to understand what you need to change. Once you have all that feedback together, you have your final manufacturable product.
Okay. So you've gone through the iterations. You have this product. Let me ask you, Frank, do you stop? How often do you validate that? Do you just like basically you get input and now, as Vas said, you go through these roughly 3 stages, just oversimplifying it, I know, Vas, but of the prototyping, going from rapid prototyping to more advanced, and hopefully in that last iteration, whether it's your third, your fifth, your eighth generation, you've got something that's more manufacturing ready. But along that line, Frank, does market validation, does that only occur in the first step, or tell me about what your thoughts are on market validation?
Oh, I see it. I live and breathe it and see it all the time. I just want to remind our listeners, it's not going to always be perfect. It might be perfect from the engineering perspective when they make your prototype. How perfect is it for the market? It's all about adoption. And whether you're targeting the West Coast and you're trying to get into the Kaisers of the world, or you're trying to get in John Hopkins, or you're trying to get in the Mayo Clinic, Henry Ford, understanding their best practices and where this fits in the broader scope will determine where you start to make those shifts and understand where your potential client base is going to absorb you. So we have a company right now, came out with an amazing product. It was a little on the Me Too side. They had all the IP around it. And as they started doing installs, they received feedback. And that came from various sources. It was coming from EVS. It was coming from materials management. It was coming from the clinical side. And so the company went back, sat down and said, how do we continue to advance on this? And some of that was determined when they found a manufacturing site. And sometimes those manufacturers have certain IP that they sit on, that they lend to you to continue to build on your product. All right. So there's always going to be shifting. You have to be very nimble in your approach to the market, but you can never get enough feedback. The question is, what do you do with that feedback? And do you always need to shift? And sometimes you need to stay your course too, and just understand that there might be some limitations. So that's why I work with a good company up front to get that dialed in. Yeah.
So Rob, building off of that and kind of talking about, Vas is talking about iteration, right? Now he's primarily talking about it also from engineering, manufacturing, tolerances, et cetera. But I'm guessing there should also be some check-ins in the market that affect how that iteration goes, Rob, right? So what does that look like?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's very comprehensive, very detailed. What it allows is, for example, what do you really know about not only the market, but the current market? What's happening, similar to what Frank was mentioned, it could be in the U.S. in certain regions, or what is it countrywide? What's happening with that product and its reimbursement or the changes with the government? So the reiteration can be steered by your competition, who's also getting ready to release a product that far exceeds the specs to be accepted by the market or an advance to the market. Then you can find out that there's other types of products being introduced in the market that's going to replace that product, and also because of recalls and safety measures. So there is a lot of different angles that can come from when you talk about reiteration.
And so you're saying that so it's not just the actual design of the product. There's so many outside factors that are going to determine the ultimate viability and success of that. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely. It's because there's a lot of nuances, especially medical device industry is growing, and it's growing almost double digits now. It all depends on what area you're talking about, but overall it's from 8 to 10% in medical device globally. And
interesting.
So as we look at the reiterations, it's really moving on a fast pace. Matter of fact, there was a company we just worked with, or still work with actually, that had a product that was released and didn't realize that a similar type of product, but not necessarily the exact type that they're using, a similar type of product, they didn't find to be their competitors. However, market share said, no, they need to take that market. And as they continue to market it, and we did identify it, and it did hold true that they now are starting to take up some of that market that they didn't realize in the beginning because of some of the due diligence that was performed. So, yeah.
And Skinner, I want to add one group that within those iterations, I think it's important to go to the final user.
Yeah.
With every iteration you do, you go to whoever doctors that are going to be using, get the widest group of different doctors located in different spaces, different areas, and let them use it, let them play with the device at each iteration to make sure that they understand how it is used, that they will be able to adapt to using it, and that they want to use it. Because
But Vass, I did a roundtable. I did a focus group with people 6 months ago to help design the initial prototype, and they gave me everything I needed to know. So why do I need to keep doing it? I don't understand. What are you telling me?
Well, I think as we discussed, very rarely can you do correct final design at the first iteration, right? If you did the design, it wasn't the final design.
Yep.
It did not have the same feeling. It did not have the same shape. It probably operated differently. At each stage, you add a little bit more usability. It's going to be different. So the more feedback you get, the better your final product is going to be. I mean, even such a thing as the little fillet there, little angle here, little bit stronger, little bit weaker, all those things count. So, I mean, even display to be designed for colorblind people. A lot of people don't think about it, but we did have a situation where we had to redesign final program because colorblind people could not use the product.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So let me ask you, when you submit your file to the FDA, do you just put something in like a field and be like, yeah, still working on it? Or like, yeah, we've got an idea, but we're going to keep working on this? Or at some point, do you have to freeze that design?
Yes, you have to freeze that design. And it basically, the step once you have a final prototype, right? As we discussed, where everything is final, that's kind of your design freeze stage. But you are still not ready to go to FDA.
Go ahead. Sorry.
According to FDA, your whatever device that you're going to be testing has to be manufactured using the final manufacturing processes, right? So whatever it is, if your product needs to be molded, you cannot use rapid prototype process for molded product, right? If you are going to be machining it, you have to use machined parts. You have to use the final materials. Everything has to be final. So once you have that, you can start your testing. You can start your whatever testing that you need to do to get into FDA. But it's still a long process even after you have your design freeze.
And you're still iterating, right? For next generation and other thoughts, right? You're not just stop there.
No, actually, once you can have iterations once you have a design freeze, but they are very minute. Now, once you went, for example, after you got 510K, you pretty much cannot make any iterations.
Okay.
FDA has a certain chart that you can follow. It says, if you basically, here's your product, here's the changes that you can make, and you do not have to get another 510K. But if you change them, like, for example, you probably can change the shape a little bit, what have you. But if material changed, if your process changed, you have to resubmit.
Okay. That's really important for our people to understand is the design freeze for the 510K is critical, right? You have to get your product to a point where you feel comfortable because you have to commercialize with that product in that design. Minor modifications only from there.
Right. And the funny thing, the hardest part about doing design freeze is stopping engineers from working on improving the product.
Yeah.
the good enough is usually not good enough for engineer.
Right, right. Yep. That's why you've got to love those engineering types. So, Frank, let me ask you something. What I've noticed in the market, and please confirm, is it feels like 15 years ago, the investment community had a greater inkling to try to buy things more in the ideation and conception phase. It seems like something happened over the last 10 years where it's the investors, at least for the bigger money, forget like some angels and getting just the seed money off the ground, but it seems like the bigger money is only coming in, at least at the earliest, it feels like at this point, after 510K. Would that be accurate? Are you seeing that same thing, or are you seeing any other trends that are emerging?
The two trends I see, you get into the big boys, they want to increase their percentage of risk mitigation. So in other words, they want readiness to market. They want to show that profitability scale, and they want to know that, if we invest in 20 companies, we're not just looking for one win, right? We want to start to increase that. We want to get 5 wins out of 20. I know that sounds obvious, but that's not the playbook they were using, I'll say pre-2020. They also want to know that that's great. You got 510K. You want to come to market. The question is, are you going to actually go into the market, or are you just going to look for a strategic? And a lot of them want to know you're going to go into the market, because you're not showing value until you do so. So you got to really stand the company up, because all eyes are on EBITDA, all eyes are on top line revenue, what your infrastructure look like. Are you getting on GPOs and IDNs? Who are your early adopters? So those are a little bit more critical than they were in the past. And I think companies are becoming a little bit more savvy that they need to bring more to the table than just another prototype and a product that's going to sit on a shelf. Right? There's plenty of IP sitting on shelves. Okay. We're not short of that. What we're short of is a good plan to execute and have adoption by health systems that solve gaps and critical problems. And it has to lead to outcomes. Outcomes become so critical in today's world, because otherwise you just become another Me Too, and you're going to be selling your product on price.
See, so that's a whole different gambit from the inventor community, right? I mean, there are people who got very wealthy and very successful at coming up with ideas, patenting the ideas, and then selling the IP behind that. It seems like today, then there's a shift of, okay, in what you said before, risk mitigation, let me de-risk that, get it through FDA. We'll buy it once you get through FDA. What you're saying now is, seems like the investor community is like, okay, that's great. You've de-risked it by getting through FDA. We now need to see you actually have some level of commercial success. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a speed to profitability. People are very impatient. So those are the trends that we see when we're talking to incubators and early stage companies, because they're already thinking, a little bit further ahead than they were in the past. I mean, I ran into a company that made a wound care product. He's literally just looking for a strategic. That's it. And he's dancing with some people, and he's being told he looks pretty. How long does that go on, right? Because how do you start to show valuation to your product?
Right.
Because if you don't get it moving, you're going to be in a position where you got to find a home for this, right? And are you going to just align yourself with maybe a large cap company that sees value in it? But even the large cap companies, they rather, bolt on, small companies that have revenue, because it gets, incorporated into their quarterly numbers. So
with that, again, looking at this trend and how it's going, where now you can't just be an inventor, right? There used to be a time, I think, when you could have an inventor, whether it be an engineer, a clinician, whatever it be on an island, create something. Now they actually have to think about taking it up through commercialization. So Rob, that due diligence throughout this process, it's not like, because again, I remember when I first came into the industry, an engineer, a scientist, a physician, a clinician could just be like, that's going to be somebody else's problem. I'm not going to worry about it. Now you have to be thinking about that when you come up with the idea. If you've got to stand up a company in order to get it acquired, that's a different philosophy. Would that be correct, Rob?
Oh, that's definitely spot on. A lot of times in working with private equity firms or venture capitalists, they do ask the questions now. Really, where does this company and why is it going to exist and how's that going to mitigate risk and give me my return in the time that I need it? And so that's kind of a pressure test at that. So whenever you see some of these companies, the due diligence that you do in performing, looking at journals such as JAMA around your product and your target market, looking at market research companies, some are reputable, some aren't. Looking at the FDA, what just recently came down from the FDA that is going to help substantiate why you're doing what you're doing and spending the money and with a level of success and execution. And another part is regulatory controls. What is regulatory released that relates to your type of product? So there's a lot of different vehicles that you can go and look at, and that's just a sampling of some. I mean, there's as much, I think at one given time I counted up to 40 that we would go to make sure there's some accuracy in the information, because in running a business and also developing a product, the last thing you want to do is be blind walking into it. Be well educated, make sure that you're well informed and that the information is current so you can have the level of confidence in taking it forward, especially speaking to VCs and private equity firms or any investor at all, but moving it forward.
I love that. And Rob, I think what you said there is such a paradigm shift in mentality, right? Before you could be an inventor on an island and just be an inventor. Today, if you're going to invent something in med tech, you have to think about becoming an entrepreneur, right? Absolutely. You have to think with a business hat. That's a vast shift in the mindset. It's really only occurred probably in the last 15 plus years. So Vas, I've got a question for you from the audience, okay? And the question is it possible to stop the 510K review if the company decides to change the device design? And what steps could a company take to update the submission or submit a new one?
So at this particular point, it's a loaded question. Can you stop? Yes, absolutely, you can stop. But I would not recommend doing it per se, depending on what's happening. As you are working with FDA, it's incredibly important for you to develop a relationship with whoever they're reviewing your product, right? In many cases, FDA can help you, right? People don't think about that, and it's foreign probably to some, but they can work with you and they can guide you, right? So, for example, you developed your product and you are going to stay in the same category. You have kind of the same IFU, you have same usage of device, but you've changed the design, right? You went, for example, from mechanical activation to electrical activation. Well, it is very possible that you can still maintain kind of the same 510K and continue moving it forward. But you can ask your reviewers as to if it's possible or not. But for stopping it, you just stop replying to FDA and they're going to drop your file. And then you're going to start the new file. But you're going to have to pay again for another filing, right? You're going to have to start developing that relationship. You just lost a lot of time. There is possibility that you may be able to save all that time and money. Yeah. I mean, if you want to have more information, access data at .fda.gov. It can be very helpful. It's going to be very good initial research. You have all kinds of information there.
Yeah, there's two things I just want to build upon quickly there. One thing is people, I don't think most of the masses are aware. I believe, and you're the expert on this, so I'm going to ask you, there is some sort of process that you can work with the FDA to help them prepare you for that filing, correct? It doesn't just have to be the filing and that's it. Is that There's some sort of process or
So
some
yeah,
system.
there is a pre-submission.
Okay, pre-submission.
And you can pretty much kind of put like give FDA. You still gonna have to find all the documents that they are looking for, right?
Right.
You submit it to them, and you can ask them for guidance.
Yep.
There is a positive to it, and there is a negative to it. The positive is that, yes, you kind of going to receive the guidance. If you're working with investors, you're going to be able to tell them exactly where FDA wants you to go. You kind of sort of de-risking it. However, whatever information you're going to receive during that meeting is going to be the final word, right? You cannot alter your path then. You kind of set your path.
Okay.
Now, some people avoid that and go directly to 510K and try to work it out that way. It all depends on your situation, and your regulatory person will be able to help and kind of guide you one way or another, depending on what can be better for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we appreciate the audience coming to that. And as we're getting to wrap up here, any other audience questions, please bring them. So one more thing I would just want to add that I thought, Vas, you did a great job of enlightening, is everybody thinks of the concept of the FDA as just this massive thing. Okay. Yet I think they always forget that everything in our world is made up of people. And in this case, your reviewer, and you said building a in some shape or form, understanding the needs of that reviewer and what they're doing and what they're asking for and where they came from.
Right.
I've seen so many horror stories of people getting a reviewer because the reviewer came from a division of orthopedics and robotics, and they're asking a question on a clinical consumable. Sometimes you need to talk to the reviewer and be like, the question that you're asking me, I just help me understand why or how to answer that with it. And sometimes just having that back and forth resets them to be like, you're right. That was a question I asked for robotics. I see how it doesn't apply.
Yes. In a lot of cases, sometimes you're going to be working with someone who is pretty much the expert in that area that you are working with. And sometimes you're going to be working with somebody who needs to be educated a little bit and understanding where they're coming from and working with them. It's a back and forth. It's incredibly important. It can save a lot of time.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. Actually, another question just came in from the audience. The question is exactly about that on the reviewers. What is the association, as I'm reading it here? What is the kind of association and relationship that you can build? Is there total firewalls around it, or can you have more open discussions?
I mean, they're not going to accept presents from you. It's a regular government kind of relationship that you can have with them. They're probably not going to become your best friend, but
Vas, I'm in sales. I mean,
I know you are. You're awesome. Who knows? But you can have a very direct back and forth with them. It's like working with your coworker, right? You know what? I disagree with you a little bit, and here is why. And they're going to come back to you. It's like, well, we need to see this and this, and this is why. And basically, they can like, well, I can do this test, right? And they're going to say, well, we would prefer for you to do this test. Or they can tell you, it's like, I want you to do this exact test. And you can have a conversation. It's like, well, I don't have resources to do this test. How I can alter this test to still give you the data that you want, but without taking the time or what have you. And we had a product that we were testing like in a beaker of water with electrodes just to give them the information that would be similar to the use on the person's body. It was very simulated, and if it would have been pushed into clinical, the project would have been lasting a very long time and very expensive. And by working with them, we were able to get it into kind of very simple test with very simple equipment.
Okay, thank you. Rob, another question just came in, and I'm going to pose it to you. How do I go about? Just give me some ways. There was reference how you talked about getting some information. What are some of the best ways, including voice of customer? What are some of the best ways? Because we talked about it being iterative. We talked about that this discovery, this validation being a journey, right? So it's not just a one-time thing. I don't just do it here and then forget about it or use that as a sacrosanct way. What are some of the methods in very succinct fashion that somebody could be using to help them on this journey and getting voice of customer and landscape knowledge, et cetera?
Yeah, and it does go back to whatever resources that you have availability to. First and foremost is that part of this goes in part of the development, right? With Voss is saying. Now, and the other part is absolutely key, and I'm a firm believer in, is the voice of the customer and having enough feedback that helps substantiate it. Make sure you have enough trials or questions to enough people to help move that forward and say, okay, this is truly a product that is solving problems and reducing risk, and also is priced right from the initial stages. Now, in going into what we do with the data and the landscape, it could take weeks, depending on the price. It could take months. It can be sources as many as 40 or 50 sources, because you cross-reference each one to make sure that it's legitimate, it's accurate. So again, depending on the type of product, myself, even Forbes has great reviews at times on medical products. For example, I was working with a company and we came out with a product, and it took us about, I think it's about 7 years to get the product out. Well, at the time we made it and submitted it to the FDA, it looked good. It was cutting edge. It was well in advance. Well, it became obsolete. The reason why, because of the Internet of a medical device. We didn't have that on it, and we were then behind. And of course, you spent millions and millions of dollars to find out that product could not be released. So reaching out to the industry to understand what the future has to hold on the development and the sources. Again, I go back to this, go to the industry publications, go to the competitors' websites and read their financials, and also where they are focused on growth. Look at market research companies. Again, there's a lot of market research companies out there. You got to be careful on which one you subscribe to, if you subscribe, and it's very pricey. But in that the information you're getting is not only accurate, but it's current. Because sometimes it's not updated depending on the company. It can be in the last year, it could be in the last 5 years, it could be in the last 10 years. So there again, a lot of the due diligence is kind of focused in that area. And again, going to the FDA and finding out who has released what do they have in pre-submission to find out if it's really going to compete with your product. So,
Yep. No, that's great. Thank you. Information is king, Rob. It's always been king. And frankly, in this day and age, if you don't try to access that information, that is a you problem, because it is everywhere. Right? There are so many ways to get it. So thanks for saying that, Rob. All right. So with that, let's take, I'll ask each of you one final thing that you want to leave the audience with in 20 seconds or less. So Frank, why don't you start that?
Look to experts that have done this. Understand that there's people that have a skill set. And if you really want to raise good capital, you got to build a good team around you.
Great. Vass.
Work with development companies that already developed this product like yours. Make sure that your regulatory people work with the product that you are developing. If you are working with electronics, make sure you have a very good regulatory electronic safety group behind that up on the standards. The standards change very, very frequently, and always have kind of dry powder because it's in many cases, and I have been there, unfortunately, so many times, where just like what we talked about, you go into the large company, you're trying to sell the product, and they say, this is wonderful idea, just brilliant. Go ahead and sell 250 of those and then come back to us. So at the end, you have your product, but make sure you have powder, dry powder to go back and start manufacturing those 250 and have sales to sell those 250, and make sure that you have a plan for it as well.
Great insight. Good. Rob.
Well, that kind of leads into my thought. It's the playbook. Make sure, similar to what the Eagles apparently did, is that they absolutely had a plan for the Super Bowl, and they executed it well. The information they had, the plays they set up, I mean, how could you ask for any more? So when you go into investing into a product, make sure your data is there, and don't assume. Assuming a lot of times will kill you. So I'll leave it with that.
Love it. Love it. Basically, find the experts, get the information, go out and execute according to the plan and with a game plan. Love it. Well, thank you, everybody. We appreciate all the audience members participating and listening and being part of our Medtech Momentum series. We encourage you to tune in to the third Medtech Momentum installment, which will be on February 25th at 11 a.m. Eastern time. In that, we will be talking a lot more about a go-to-market strategy and really focusing on now how do we start thinking, because as we just talked about in this one, inventors on an island, they don't really exist anymore. You have to be a business person. You have to think about how I'm going to commercialize this. And the third installment is really going to have us focusing on how do I turn this into a commercial success. So with that, we thank everybody for investing the time with us. We hope you found it enlightening. To our panelists, thanks for enlightening us with all of your knowledge and information. And we look forward to having everybody back on the 25th. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.